Hello again and welcome to Retro PC Refurbs. Today we have the Acorn Electron, or the ELK as it was known for short. Here you can see me applying hydrogen peroxide to refresh its colour as it has yellowed slightly over time. This was marketed as a low-cost BBC Micro which had many of the features of the BBC but was priced to compete with the ZX Spectrum. The ELK had 32 kilobytes of RAM and 32 kilobytes of ROM. This was due to be released for Christmas 1982 but had production problems in Malaysia, forcing Acorn to switch to the AB Electronics in Wales and Wong's of Hong Kong, eventually being released in August 1983 for £199, compared to the ZX Spectrum of £175 for the 48K model. Reviewers favoured this machine over the ZX Spectrum and Commodore 64, noting the machine's excellent graphics compared to the two other machines, with a graphics resolution of 640 by 256. Described as unrivaled by other machines up to the BBC Model B itself. Although the ELK could play some BBC games, these didn't run as fast as the BBC, in fact was reported to run at half the speed. Its own games designed just for the ELK ran a lot faster, but differences to the BBC could be seen in colour and sound for them to run at the same speed. It used bitmap graphics and could connect to either a television set, a colour RGB monitor, or a monochrome monitor. Several expansions were made available to provide many of the capabilities of the BBC Micro. Acorn introduced a general purpose expansion unit, the Plus One, with an analog joystick and parallel ports, together with a cartridge slot into which ROM cartridges could be inserted, providing software or other hardware expansions, such as a disk interface. Acorn also produced a dedicated disk expansion, the Plus 3, featuring a disk controller and a 3.5-inch floppy drive. Whilst this is retro brightening, here is some excerpts from a documentary on Channel 4 called Made in the 80s, Decade That Shaped Our World. This details the rise of Acorn, the BBC Micro of which the ELK is based on, and how Acorn dominated the chip industry with the invention of the ARM chip.
Afraid that Britain could become obsolete, the government commit to an ambitious training program.
But the biggest change I made was a program which Margaret herself launched to get one computer into every school.
When it comes to trying to take a new idea and to get it into industry, the brain is at its best when you're young.
It's a marvellous learning tool, and just as the Victorians had slate and chalk, our children are going to have computers.
A new BBC series builds on the idea, turning a whole generation onto the power of the microprocessor.
The BBC began to get worried how would it make a programme about things without having a computer attached to it. So the notion became they would need their own microcomputer.
And the rumour had it that Clive would get it.
Sophie and Herman joined forces with tech guru Chris Curry, who had been working for Sinclair.
And that really got Chris going. He said, no, this can't be, we've got to get this contract. He wanted to leave Sinclair and start his own company. And I said, well, that's fine, Chris, but how much does it cost to start a company? He says, 100 quid, you have 50 quid. It was wonderful that at that time you could start a company in Britain, probably uniquely in Europe, for £100. That's what we Steve Ferbert was also well known as somebody who had built his own microprocessor. Steve and Sophie, the key designers, were unusually gifted. It really was a family. Many of our best designs were actually produced over the dinner table.
Chris Curry got wind of the fact the BBC wanted a microcomputer. Chris said the BBC should come and see our prototype machine, which didn't exist. We had nothing. So on Sunday night, Herman rang separately myself and Steve Ferber at home to say, can you get something together by Friday? And we both told him to take a short walk and jump off a pier.
So I put the phone down and picked up the phone to Stephen and said, Stephen, I've just been talking to Sophie about producing a computer by Friday. And she said, if we really try very hard, we might be able to achieve that. And he says, this is absolutely nuts. There's no way we can have a computer by Friday. But if Sophie is in, I am in.
Then Herman rang back and said, I've just talked to Steve. Steve says it will be very hard, but we can do it. And I said, well, if Steve thinks it's very hard and we can do it, I'll come and try and help, even though I still think it's impossible.
And we did, miraculously. I mean, the BBC arrived, they looked at the computer, they couldn't believe that they had a working computer 4 days after they told us what they wanted.
Acorn got the contract from the BBC to make the BBC microcomputer and the successor range of computers.
We had our own idea of how successful the BBC Micro would be. We thought 50,000, where the BBC thought 20,000. I think we sold 1.25 million in the end.
This is a glimpse of Acorn at home, and a rather hectic place it is.
The microprocessor is basically a computer on a chip. We realized that we needed a 16-bit or 32-bit machine. And we then talked to Intel about using their chip. But we said, if you sell us just the design, maybe we can make something. Being rather arrogant at the time because we were flying high with the BBC Micro. But we were nobody on a global scale, so Intel said, get lost. And we said, what? You get lost, we'll do our own.
We started creating ARM in about 1983, and we had working chips on the 26th of April 1985.
This revolutionary new chip, called ARM, is the most efficient ever, built on the counterintuitive idea that the processor needs to understand fewer, more simple commands. The result is faster chips that need less power.
Steve was worrying about the power and touching the ARM, thinking, oh, that's nice and cold. I wonder how much power it's actually using. So he connected the meter to the test points and discovered the processor wasn't connected to its power supply. Not at all. Enough power was coming in from its peripheral circuitry to run it.
Not even the people who developed the chip realized the seismic importance of what they achieved.
We didn't think much of it at the time. It wouldn't become truly important until people wanted to make battery-powered devices, and then it became very important indeed.
Acorn, maker of the wildly popular BBC Micro, is also struggling to grow.
We never had any stock, and we just brought on more and more assembly lines. And then we came out with the little brother of the BBC Micro, the Acorn Electron, for which there was an even greater demand. This changed the year that people wanted to have CD players.
There were all sorts of other computers on the market coming up to the Christmases of 85, 86, and those Christmases never happened for the home computer companies.
The average school child hasn't really changed much over the years. But school has. The computer has arrived. Under a government scheme, schools all over Britain are introducing microcomputers, and they're choosing one in particular, made by Acorn. As a result, the language it uses, called BBC Basic, has become the acknowledged computer language for schools. And now parents can catch up. For Acorn have produced a micro for the home that also uses BBC Basic. It's called the Electron. It's powerful, it's versatile, and it's only £199. So now your children can teach you all they know. The Acorn Electron can be found at larger W.H. Smith's or your local Acorn dealer. Just call 200 0200 for your nearest stockist.
We started Acorn Computers, and 5 years later, we had revenues of £100 million. Chris and I were number 10 and number 11 richest in Britain. We were almost daily news in the Daily Mail and all the other tabloids as the people with the Midas touch. 2 years later, we had screwed up royally. So, we got into serious financial difficulty and needed to be bailed out, and Olivetti was willing to bail us out.
The rollout of the ARM processor, quietly developed by the makers of the BBC Micro, is another huge landmark, not just here, but in the emerging Silicon Valley.
We kept it a secret for a long time, to the extent that when we started telling people about it, the universal reaction was, you can't possibly have done this. You couldn't have kept it a secret for so long. We'd have heard about it.
Apple gambles $1.5 million on a stake in this brilliant British invention. Selling it on as a profit helps fund the rebirth of the company whose iPods, Macs and iPhones are styled by another legendary British pioneer, Johnny Ive.
The reason they invested in ARM at all was that they wanted ARM chips for mobiles. They needed more performance. I guess it's why they still use ARM and are now cashing out Intel.
And one story that is not widely known is John Sculley of Apple's story. If Apple had not been able to sell a $1.5 million stake for $800 million, Apple would not have survived. If they had hung onto it until now, it would be worth $15 billion. We, in our wildest dreams, would not ever have thought that we will produce a microprocessor, the ARM, where we would produce now 22 billion.
Well, the first billion was the hard bit. After that, it was just a matter of arithmetic. They run your life, your cameras, your phone.
There is an ARM in the Bluetooth, an ARM in the Wi-Fi.
Your modem in the house, your Wi-Fi access point.
An ARM in the USB, an ARM in the touch controller. You will have at least 20 ARMs.
This world as we know it is not possible without them. These people are royalty. Hauser is royalty, Wilson is royalty. Legends.
So it's time to remove this now. It's been in here for several days now. I actually put some foil around the outside just to make it so it's a little bit brighter and it's not leaking light so much. So I'm now going to take this out, clean it up, or clean off all the hydrogen peroxide that's inside it. I am wearing gloves because the hydrogen peroxide that is on here does sting your hands when you get it on there. So firstly, for a short period, the Electron was reportedly the best-selling computer in the United Kingdom, with an estimated 200 to 250,000 machines sold over its entire commercial lifespan. With production effectively discontinued by Acorn in 1985, only being beaten by the Spectrum and C64 over their lifespan. After Acorn discontinued production in 1985, existing stock was sold off at discount prices. This led to increased demand for third-party software and expansions for the machine. While it may not have been as popular as the Spectrum or Commodore 64 and the Amstrad, it did sell in sufficient numbers to ensure that new software titles from established producers were being made, right up until the early 90s, with mainstream publications dedicated to the machine having effectively supported it for 5 years beyond the point at which Acorn's own support had ceased. Okay, so we are going to play some Electron games through my phone. So we have play UEF. Okay, and then we have the Electron. So click in on that. Then we have a list of games. So when you click on a game, you will see a pretend tape and a file, a play file. So that will go through the earphone jack of the phone into the Electron. So I have the E for ear. Now that's plugged in. So I would type chain. And now it's searching what would normally come out of the cassette via tape, but now it will be coming out of my phone. So I need the volume completely up on my phone, otherwise it can't hear it. So pressing play, and you get a fake turning of a cassette. It's found Bomb Alley, and we'll be loading it. Okay, so the first bit is loaded, which is normally a loading screen or a info screen. It's still playing. So according to this, it will take 3 minutes and 31. Obviously I do own the cassette, which is somewhere here. So here we have it. The game is working and playing. It's very hard to play with one hand. So this can be done with any computer that uses the tape. So Spectrum, Commodore 64, anything that from the early 80s that was on tape.